All right, so what does it mean when Newsweek suddenly reports betting markets are spiking on Trump resignation odds? When Polymarket shows resignation probability jumping above 4% after Trump disappears from public view for several days?
Obviously, the Nixon tapes were part of the ultimate demise of the Nixon presidency, but you say the tape that we heard this weekend from President Trump calling the Georgia Secretary of State.
Because the President of the United States, we are listening in real time to the President propose that there be a conspiracy to steal the election for the presidency of the United States. A coup, whatever word we choose to use, a dangerously out of control, unstable President of the United States provoking a constitutional crisis. And it's no accident that the generals.
When social media explodes with speculation about whether he might be seriously ill or could be facing some kind of health crisis, when political analysts start openly discussing whether the 25th Amendment could actually be invoked if his condition potentially worsens, when Trump himself admits at a GOP retreat that losing the 2026 midterms means I will get impeached, stating it as fact as inevitable consequence, yeah, that means we're potentially watching a presidency that might be unraveling in real time, and the resignation speculation alone could be doing as much political damage as an actual resignation would. And here's why this matters so much. Because when betting markets start pricing in resignation scenarios, even at relatively low probabilities like 4%, that creates mainstream legitimacy for discussing Trump's possible premature exit. Markets don't just reflect reality, they help shape political perceptions. When sophisticated investors are putting real money on Trump potentially not finishing his term, that signals to political elites, to media, to voters that forced exit scenarios aren't just progressive fantasies, but might be realistic possibilities worth gaming out. And that perception shift, that move from fringe speculation to mainstream consideration, that's what could be devastating Trump politically right now, even without any actual resignation happening. Think about what that means. Resignation speculation reveals perceived weakness, reveals potential instability, reveals that informed observers believe there might be realistic scenarios where Trump doesn't complete his term. And once that belief takes hold in markets, in media, in political circles, it becomes self-reinforcing, makes Trump look weaker, makes allies potentially less willing to defend him, makes opponents possibly more aggressive in pursuing accountability. All because resignation moved from impossible to plausible in collective political consciousness. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built John Brown's show, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you appreciate what we're doing here, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. All right, let's get back to the video. Now let's talk about what specifically triggered this resignation speculation spike, because the timeline matters for understanding whether this is just random noise or potentially reflects something real. Newsweek reports the betting market spike happened after Trump had what they called an unexplained public absence, meaning Trump disappeared from public view for a period of time without clear explanation of where he was or what he was doing. And in that information vacuum, speculation filled the void. Social media erupted with claims he might have died, might be gravely ill, might be facing some kind of serious health crisis requiring hospitalization or treatment. Now, most of those claims appear to have been false or exaggerated. Trump eventually reappeared, seemingly fine. But the fact that betting markets responded so dramatically to his absence that odds jumped above 4% based on health rumors, that reveals something important about Trump's perceived fragility right now. Markets believe health could be a realistic factor that might force early exit. Could create scenario where Trump, unable to continue, might choose resignation over public incapacity. All possible, all being priced by markets watching for any sign of weakness that could trigger forced departure. And here's what makes health speculation particularly potent politically. Because unlike impeachment or 25th Amendment, which require specific political coalitions and processes, health crisis could force exit regardless of political support. Can't will your way through serious medical emergency. Can't tweet your way out of genuine incapacity. So health represents vulnerability that Trump can't fully control through normal political combat. And that uncontrollable nature of potential health crisis that makes it scarier for Trump than political threats he can fight directly. But health speculation is just one dimension of resignation discussion. The other major factor driving speculation is what Trump himself said at that January 6, 2026 GOP retreat. According to multiple reports, Trump told Republican lawmakers flat out that if they lose the House in November midterms, I will get impeached. Not might get impeached, not could face impeachment pressure. Will get impeached, stating it as certainty, as inevitable consequence of Democrats gaining House majority. Think about what that admission reveals. That sitting president acknowledging his own impeachment is likely outcome if political conditions change. That's admitting his survival in office is entirely dependent on Republicans maintaining House control. That's revealing to everyone, including his enemies, exactly what he fears, exactly what threatens him, exactly how precarious his position might be. All self-inflicted damage through inability to hide vulnerability, through compulsive need to warn allies even when warning reveals weakness to opponents who could exploit it. And Trump framing 2026 as personal survival election, that's extraordinary deviation from normal political messaging. Usually midterms are about policy control, about party balance, about legislative agenda, but Trump making it explicitly about his personal survival, about avoiding impeachment, about protecting himself from removal. That personalizes stakes in a way that could be politically damaging, makes election referendum on Trump, makes Republican candidates potentially have to defend Trump's survival rather than run on their own merits, makes every race possibly about whether voters want to protect Trump from accountability or enable his impeachment. Share this video with everyone you know, because now let's talk about the 25th Amendment discussions among Democrats, because that's alternative removal mechanism being seriously considered. Al Jazeera reports some Democrats are explicitly discussing using 25th Amendment if Trump's behavior potentially worsens. Now, 25th Amendment requires Vance and cabinet majority to declare Trump unfit. That's extraordinarily high bar, extremely unlikely without major crisis or obvious breakdown. But fact it's being discussed openly shows seriousness of concerns about Trump's mental fitness, about stability, about whether his conduct might suggest some kind of incapacity. And discussing 25th Amendment serves strategic purposes, even if actual invocation seems unlikely. Creates narrative about Trump's mental fitness, creates questions about his stability, creates public perception that removal for potential incapacity is legitimate consideration rather than fringe conspiracy. And that narrative could damage Trump even without actual 25th Amendment action, makes voters potentially question fitness, makes allies possibly nervous about defending mental state, makes questions about capacity mainstream rather than impolite. Now here's where all these threads come together into comprehensive political crisis for Trump. You've got betting markets pricing resignation possibility. You've got health speculation creating vulnerability Trump can't fully control. You've got Trump's own admission that impeachment is inevitable if Republicans lose 2026. You've got 25th Amendment discussions creating questions about mental fitness. You've got opinion polls showing approval in high 30s with drops among Republicans on ethics and mental fitness, all creating comprehensive narrative of presidency that might be in crisis, of Trump who could be vulnerable, of multiple exit scenarios all being discussed, all being gamed, all seeming at least somewhat plausible based on Trump's conduct and political situation. And that comprehensive uncertainty, that environment where Trump's premature departure is being seriously discussed through multiple mechanisms, that's what could be devastating politically. Because even without actual resignation or removal, the speculation itself weakens presidency, undermines authority, makes Trump look potentially finished, potentially vulnerable, potentially like lame duck waiting for some form of inevitable exit. Make sure you're subscribed to John Brown's show, because here's what resignation speculation does politically even without actual resignation. First, it signals weakness to political elites. When markets are betting on resignation, when pundits are predicting possible forced removal, when Democrats are discussing various removal mechanisms, All that creates perception Trump might be in trouble, might be vulnerable, might not survive full term. And political actors respond to those signals, makes some Republicans potentially consider distancing preemptively, makes Democrats possibly more aggressive in pursuing accountability, makes everyone recalculate their relationship to Trump based on perceived instability. Second, resignation speculation undermines Trump's strongman brand. His entire political identity is built on image of strength, of dominance, of never backing down, of always winning. But when everyone's discussing whether he might resign, whether he might be forced out, whether presidency could end prematurely, that directly contradicts strongman image, makes him look potentially weak, potentially vulnerable, potentially unable to maintain control. All devastating to political brand built entirely on projected strength and invincibility. Third, it changes 2026 dynamics in ways that could hurt Republicans. If election becomes about whether voters want to protect Trump from impeachment versus enable his accountability, that's much harder terrain for Republicans than running on policy agenda or Biden criticism. Makes every race potentially a referendum on Trump rather than on local issues or individual candidates. And with Trump's approval in high 30s, making election about him personally could be terrible strategy for Republican candidates trying to win swing districts. Fourth, resignation speculation creates self-fulfilling prophecy of weakness. The more people discuss Trump's possible exit, the weaker he appears. The weaker he appears, the less willing allies might be to defend him. The less defense he gets, the more vulnerable he becomes to actual accountability measures, all creating downward spiral where speculation about exit makes exit potentially more likely by eroding political support that keeps him in office. Now let's address the elephant in the room, which is whether actual resignation is likely or whether this is all just speculation without real foundation. Based on everything we know about Trump's psychology and political incentives, voluntary resignation seems extremely unlikely. Trump's ego wouldn't allow it, would see resignation as admission of defeat, as validation of critics, as ultimate humiliation. Can't imagine Trump choosing to leave office voluntarily under political pressure, would rather fight through impeachment, through scandals, through everything than resign. But here's where it gets complicated. Forced removal through impeachment after 2026 Democratic victory, that might actually be a realistic scenario. Trump himself admitted it, said if Republicans lose House, I will get impeached. And if Democrats do win House majority, if they do pursue impeachment over Venezuela operation or other alleged abuses, Trump would face serious threat not through resignation, but through constitutional removal process that he can't prevent through willpower alone. And that's where Trump's own admission becomes so revealing. By telling Republicans that 2026 loss means his impeachment, Trump acknowledging his vulnerability, acknowledging that only Republican House majority stands between him and accountability, acknowledging that his survival is entirely dependent on midterm results, all confirming what Democrats believe about his conduct being impeachable, just prevented by Republican control that could end in November. So here's where this leaves us. Trump potentially breaking down under weight of resignation speculation, under recognition that his continuation in office might not be guaranteed, under admission that impeachment is likely if political conditions change. Not actual resignation happening now, but comprehensive discussion of exit scenarios, all revealing political weakness, all showing vulnerability, all creating perception that presidency could end prematurely through various possible mechanisms. And that perception, that mainstream belief that Trump's position might be precarious, that could be doing as much political damage as actual forced exit would, because undermines authority, undermines stability, undermines ability to govern effectively when everyone's gaming your possible departure. If you want to stay on top of stories like this, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments. Do you think Trump will actually face serious removal pressure if Democrats win in 2026? Or is this all just political theater? Because honestly, based on Trump's own admission, based on comprehensive impeachable conduct Democrats are documenting, based on political dynamics that could give Democrats House majority, Removal through impeachment after 2026 might not be speculation, but realistic trajectory if midterms go wrong for Republicans. Share this with everyone because this story continues, and we'll be watching closely what happens next. Stay tuned.